Men are less concerned with injuring one who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared. Niccolo Machiavelli. You were taught that being good is the safest armor, but Machiavelli and Jung in his own register warn you that this mask often becomes your leash. Ask yourself when you rush to please, whose approval are you really buying? When you bite back truth to stay likable, do you not feel the resentment fermenting inside you? And when you sacrifice your time, your energy, your clarity just to keep harmony, who actually benefits? Your conscience or the one exploiting your compliance? Goodness without proportion is not virtue. It is servitude dressed up as morality. Look closely. How often have you regretted saying no compared to how often you regretted saying yes too quickly? How many apologies have you made not because you were wrong, but because you were terrified of being seen as selfish? And how much of your life has been rented out to those who sensed you would always yield if they pressed hard enough? Jung would call this the inflation of persona, the overfed mask that starves the rest of you. Machiavelli would call it political suicide, rulers undone not by cruelty, but by their obsession with appearing virtuous. The dangerous truth is this: when you try to be good at all costs, you forfeit the very sovereignty that makes you trustworthy. So the question presses in on you now. Will you keep performing goodness until you vanish? Or will you reclaim the darker, steadier parts of yourself that make you whole? When the next demand comes, will you bend to please or stand in proportion, even if it unsettles those who depended on your compliance? You live in a culture that rewards appearances. Being good is praised, even when it hollows you out. From childhood, you learn that compliance earns love, silence keeps peace, and self-sacrifice proves worth. But Jung warns that what you refuse in yourself does not disappear, it returns as sabotage. Machiavelli warns that rulers obsessed with looking virtuous end up powerless. Together they confront you with a harsh question. Are you living as a sovereign of your own life, or a servant to the moods of others? Think of your daily reflexes. How many times this week did you agree to something you had no energy for? How often did you soften your words, not because it was true, but because you feared disapproval? Do you call that kindness or cowardice? And when guilt spikes the moment you consider saying no, is it moral conscience or a conditioned alarm trained to keep you small? Context means naming the cost. Every time you overfeed the persona, the mask of being agreeable, you starve the shadow, the vital strengths you need for proportion, anger that guards thresholds, discernment that sizes commitments, rest that fuels clarity. When you exile those forces, you attract people who embody them against you: bullies, manipulators, users. What you will not own, you will meet in someone else's hands. So Machiavelli and Jung converge. Stop chasing goodness as reputation and start practicing wholeness as discipline. Virtue is not endless appeasement. It is proportion, truth spoken with timing, limits enforced without cruelty, care given without collapse. The issue is not whether people will judge you, they will. The issue is whether you will betray yourself just to keep being called good. When the next demand arrives, will you answer from fear or from sovereignty? The Jungian foundations behind your obsession with being good reveal why it corrodes you. Jung does not dismiss morality. He cautions against one-sidedness. Whenever you inflate one pole of your psyche, the neglected opposite returns with vengeance. To stop trying to be a good person is not to embrace cruelty. It is to embrace wholeness. Let us unfold what this means. The persona is your mask. You polish it to appear kind, selfless, agreeable. Society rewards it, families demand it, institutions codify it. But when persona swells beyond proportion, you become a role, not a person. Have you noticed how quickly you apologize even when no wrong was committed? How often you laugh at jokes that wound you simply to stay pleasant? A mask without balance suffocates. You begin to mistake performance for truth. Do you recognize when you are acting and when you are actually living? The shadow contains what persona disowns. Anger, ambition, cunning, appetite, these are branded bad and shoved underground. But the psyche will not tolerate exile forever. Suppressed anger leaks as passive aggression or explodes without proportion. Denied ambition returns as envy of the bold. Rejected cunning resurfaces in others who exploit you because you cannot wield it yourself. Who in your life embodies the traits you most despise but secretly need? What would happen if you hired those capacities instead of fighting them? Projection is the next snare. You label others selfish because you have buried your own needs. You call them manipulative because you fear your own capacity for strategy. You admire the strong while resenting them, forgetting that strength disowned becomes strength outsourced. Every time you say, "I could never be like that," you build a dependency on those who will live that trait for you, often against you. Do you see how predators sense the gap and move in where you have gone blind? Complexes reinforce the cycle. Old wounds, childhood scoldings, cultural conditioning, religious guilt flare whenever you assert yourself. Saying no triggers shame, as if survival still depended on compliance. Jung teaches that complexes are fragments of the psyche that act like many personalities. In those moments, it is not you who replies, but the frightened child, the obedient student, the guilty sinner. Can you name the complex when it rises, or will you keep mistaking its voice for conscience? Compensation and enantiodromia, Jung's laws of balance, complete the picture. Push too far into goodness, and the pendulum swings. Resentment builds, then collapses into bitterness, cynicism, even cruelty. The good parent becomes the suffocating martyr. The good employee becomes the secret saboteur. Which side of the swing are you on now, the brittle appeasement or the backlash? And how long before your imbalance flips? Individuation, the task of becoming whole, requires that you integrate both sides. Goodness without strength is servitude. Strength without care is tyranny. Jung never asked you to discard morality, he demanded proportion. Machiavelli echoes him in political form. A ruler obsessed with reputation of virtue becomes weak, but one who integrates firmness with prudence governs with authority. Will you keep chasing approval while secretly corroding, or will you allow shadow to stand beside persona so you are both humane and unbent? The archetypes whisper caution too. The martyr smiles while withering. The tyrant punishes when persona collapses. The manipulator thrives when you deny your own cunning. Each lives in you, each waits to govern you if you refuse awareness. Which figure has been ruling you lately without your consent? So the theoretical ground is stern but merciful. Persona must soften, shadow must serve, projections must be withdrawn, complexes must be named, opposites must be endured. Only then do you stop chasing good as a mask and begin embodying wholeness as law. The question is not whether you will be judged, you will. The question is whether you will betray yourself in order to be praised. When the next demand comes, will you answer from an inflated mask or from the governed self that Machiavelli and Jung alike demand you recover? Picture a scene you already know too well. At work, a colleague announces a new project. You have no time, no energy, but before you even breathe the word yes escapes your mouth. Why? Because your persona has been trained to equate refusal with danger. You smile, nod, assure them you're glad to help, while inside your chest tightens and your stomach churns. Later that night, you scroll emails in exhaustion, resenting the very person you agreed to assist. Who betrayed you? Was it them? Or was it the part of you that feared disapproval more than depletion? The pattern repeats at home. A family member presses, "Can you handle this for me?" Your mouth obeys before your soul consents. You whisper to yourself that it's love, it's duty, it's the right thing. But is it? Or is it appeasement disguised as virtue? The resentment piles silently. You dream of snapping, of saying no, of being heard as you truly are. But by day you keep performing goodness until the gap between mask and marrow grows unbearable. How many of your family duties are actually cages you built out of fear of rejection? In relationships, the stakes turn sharper. Your partner criticizes, pushes, tests. Instead of answering truthfully, you smooth the tension with apologies or silence. You are rewarded with temporary calm, but it is the calm of surrender, not of truth. Over time, your partner mistakes compliance for consent, then entitlement. You become less a person and more an accessory to their moods. Do you call that love or servitude? And when you finally erupt after months of swallowing, whose cruelty will be blamed? Theirs for pressing or yours for exploding? Jung would name this the exile of shadow. You have banished anger, cunning, appetite, and strength, convincing yourself they are bad. But Machiavelli would remind you, rulers who obsess over appearing virtuous become prey. The world senses your pliability. Predators are drawn to the sweetness of your mask, for it guarantees they can press without consequence. How many manipulators have you attracted not because you were weak, but because you were unwilling to wield the shadow capacities that could guard your threshold? Think of the workplace martyr who always volunteers. At first they are praised, soon they are exploited. Their resentment curdles into gossip, sabotage, or collapse. Everyone wonders, how did such a good person become so bitter? But the truth is simpler. They confused goodness with servitude until the psyche revolted. Are you walking the same path? Consider the good parent who never says no. They pour themselves out for their children, masking fatigue with smiles. Decades later, they wonder why resentment poisons their bond. Children did not need a parent without edges. They needed one with proportion. Love without boundaries breeds entitlement, not gratitude. What legacy are you leaving? One of martyrdom or one of modeled sovereignty? The ordinary scenes expose the same law. Every time you say yes against truth, you sacrifice not only energy but authority. You teach others you are rentable, bendable, endlessly available. You think you are keeping peace, but in reality, you are training others to ignore your humanity. What frightens you more, being briefly disliked or being perpetually unseen? The example is not grand, but it is decisive. A workplace task, a family request, a partner's demand. Each moment is a test of sovereignty. Every appeasement corrodes your dignity. Every proportionate refusal restores it. Ask yourself, when the next demand comes, will you collapse into persona, smiling while you rot inside? Or will you call shadow to stand guard, letting your no be as moral as any yes? Will you keep trading sovereignty for the mask of goodness? Or will you reclaim wholeness, even if it unsettles those who benefited from your compliance? This is the ordinary theater where the good person is slowly destroyed. And this is where you decide whether to repeat the script or to step off the stage entirely. The machinery of being good is precise, and unless you see its gears, you will keep grinding yourself down. It begins in the body. The moment someone makes a demand, your nervous system flares, heart rate rises, chest tightens, adrenaline spikes. You mistake this for moral urgency, but it is not conscience, it is conditioning. You were trained long ago to equate refusal with danger. So your body screams yes before your soul has time to answer. Do you notice how often your agreements come from panic, not from proportion? Next comes cognition. Your persona, the mask of likability, takes the wheel. You rehearse polite phrases, bend your tone, smooth your edges. Meanwhile, the shadow, your anger, discernment, and appetite, pounds at the door, reminding you of your limits. But you exile it again, convincing yourself that saying no would be selfish. Ask yourself, is it selfish to protect your clarity, or is it servitude to abandon it? Which voice actually safeguards your humanity? The persona that pleases, or the shadow that guards? Then projection enters. The badness you refuse to own in yourself is pasted onto others. You see assertive people as cruel, boundary setters as cold, truth tellers as dangerous. In truth, they embody the very traits you refuse to cultivate. Instead of integrating strength, you outsource it, attracting partners, bosses, or friends who wield it against you. How many of your disappointments with others are really disowned fragments of yourself begging for recognition? Complexes reinforce the loop. Childhood shame, religious guilt, cultural scripts all ignite when you resist compliance. You hear echoes of old scoldings. Don't be difficult, be polite, think of others first. These voices are not the present, they are ghosts. But when you obey them, you collapse into the child self instead of standing as the adult. Do you know the difference between conscience and conditioning? Between truth and a phantom voice dragging you backward? Energetically, the cost is severe. Every time you appease, you drain yourself. You think you are giving love, but you are leaking vitality. Predators sense it. They recognize pliability, the way wolves smell blood. They press, knowing you will fold. And when you do, you confirm their instinct. You reinforce the very dynamic you resent. Which is worse, being disliked once, or being consumed repeatedly by those who sense you cannot hold a line? Reinforcement is the cruelest gear. Each appeasement relieves your anxiety briefly, so your body learns to equate surrender with safety. The cycle deepens. Demand, panic, yes, temporary relief, deeper resentment. You confuse this with virtue, but it is addiction. You buy short-term calm at the price of long-term corrosion. How many times has your yes today stolen strength from tomorrow? Yet the mechanism is not purely destructive. It can be rewired. Jung's law of compensation ensures that extremes flip. When you live in appeasement, resentment will eventually erupt. Better to integrate proportion now than to collapse later. Machiavelli's realism aligns rulers who obsess over goodness are undone. Those who balance mercy with firmness endure. The mechanism is not telling you to become cruel. It is demanding that you become whole. The ethical guardrail must be named. When you finally reclaim shadow, the temptation will be to swing into harshness, to punish with silence, to retaliate with scorn. But silence without return is exile, not proportion. Anger without timing is tyranny, not truth. The discipline is motive. Are you refusing to preserve dignity or to wound? Are you withdrawing to recover proportion or to punish? Which legacy will your strength leave, trust or fear? So the analysis stands clear. Physiology drives you toward reflexive yes. Cognition polishes the mask. Projection outsources strength. Complexes bind you to ghosts. Energy drains into appeasement. Reinforcement cements the habit, and imbalance flips into backlash. But if you interrupt the gears, if you pause, breathe, name the complex, recall shadow with one brief line, you begin to replace corrosion with cadence. Now, the question is yours. Will you keep mistaking panic for duty, persona for morality, appeasement for virtue? Or will you dismantle the mechanism before it destroys you? When the next request lands, will you rent your life again, or will you test the terrifying strength of a proportionate no? The task of escaping the prison of goodness begins with practice, daily, small, unspectacular steps that add up to sovereignty. You do not need grand gestures, you need hinges that swing the door from appeasement to proportion. First, train the body before the mind. Every time a demand lands, notice the surge, tight chest, shallow breath, heat in the face. Instead of answering from that spike, elongate one exhale. Let silence be your first reply. Can you endure 10 seconds of discomfort without rescuing the room? Can you trust that silence does not equal cruelty, but creates the container in which clarity can form? If you cannot govern those 10 seconds, how will you govern your life? Second, install a lexicon of refusal. Words matter less than cadence, but a few prepared lines save you from collapse. That doesn't work for me. I'll need to review before I answer. Let's revisit tomorrow. These phrases are not aggression, they are guardrails. Without them, you default to yes. Will you keep improvising under pressure, or will you rehearse a grammar that protects your truth? Third, restructure your environment. Publish boundaries in advance. I check messages at 9, 1, and 5. No decisions are made late at night. Urgent means call. By externalizing rules, you shift from private struggle to civic hygiene. People learn to respect rhythm when it is visible. How much of your exhaustion comes not from malice, but from unspoken availability that others exploit? If you do not declare your cadence, why expect others to honor it? Fourth, audit your circles. Each week ask, who drains me? Who nourishes me? Who distorts me? Track resentment on a scale of 1 to 10. Count how many times you apologize for delay or not being enough. Watch those numbers fall as you enforce proportion. If you believe what you measure, will you keep tracking likes and approval? Or will you measure rest restored, resentment lowered, promises kept? Fifth, reclaim shadow as servant. Anger is not a sin. It is a sentinel that guards thresholds. Appetite is not shameful. It sizes your commitments so you do not overextend. Rest is not laziness. It fuels wattage so your truth has power behind it. Which of these shadow capacities will you assign tomorrow? And when guilt calls you selfish, will you know it as a conditioned alarm, or will you bow to it like law? Sixth practice, repair. You will fail. You will say yes too fast, snap too hard, vanish too long. The test is not perfection, but return. When you miss issue 1, brief correction. I said I'd reply at 9, I missed, here is my answer now. No opera, no excuses, just proportion. Will you allow repair to be evidence of strength, or will you keep treating it as proof of weakness? Seventh, normalize your discipline publicly. Share your cadence with your partner, your child, your team. Teach them the loop. Cue, reaction, relief, reinforcement. Show them why you are breaking it. When others understand the structure, they stop tugging at your nerves. Do you want to live in secrecy, always defending your silence, or in a shared culture where silence is recognized as governance? Finally, rehearse the hinge daily. Each morning, imagine the demand that usually undoes you. The boss's sudden request, the partner's sharp remark, the child's urgent cry. Visualize the pause, the breath, the brief line, the lawful return. By the time the real moment comes, your nervous system will already know the choreography. Will you leave your sovereignty to improvisation, or will you install it as habit? The application is merciless but liberating. Breath before reply, lexicon before collapse, structure before chaos, audit before denial, shadow before sabotage, repair before guilt, culture before secrecy, rehearsal before ambush. Repeat until presence replaces panic, until your yes regains weight, until others realize you are no longer rentable. So the question confronts you plainly when the next demand arrives. Will you betray yourself for the mask of goodness? Or will you practice the proportion that Machiavelli respected and Young required? Will you keep bartering sovereignty for approval? Or will you terrify the world quietly, steadily, by becoming whole? The end is not charm, but jurisdiction. To stop trying to be a good person is not to become cruel. It is to become whole. Jung reminds you that the disowned shadow does not vanish. It waits, sabotages, and erupts. Machiavelli reminds you that a ruler obsessed with appearing virtuous becomes prey. Together, they force the same question: will you govern yourself or be governed by the need to be liked? Think of what you have traded away for the mask of goodness. Time you did not have. Energy you could not spare. Words you did not mean. How many yeses still echo in your body as resentment? How many people grew bold in their demands because you taught them you would fold if pressed? And how much of your own strength lies rusting because you feared it would make you bad? The correction is not to abandon morality, but to anchor it in proportion. Anger must stand at the threshold, not in explosions, but as a sentinel. Rest must power truth so that your words carry weight. Discernment must size commitments so that your yes is wood, not sugar. Will you keep renting your sovereignty for temporary approval, or will you practice the pause that outlasts frenzy? Now the call is plain. This week, choose one refusal. One hinge hours, channels, tone that you will guard. One line you will keep even if it unsettles others. Then measure not their applause, but your own clarity, your own rest, your own regained presence. You were not called to be endlessly good. You were called to be whole. Wholeness terrifies the ungoverned because it cannot be bought. So when the next demand comes, will you vanish behind persona, or will you answer from the self, firm, proportionate, sovereign? The mask of goodness dissolves in a day. The cadence of truth endures a lifetime. Which one will you wear tomorrow?